You're listening to Under the Shell Podcast, the best in America.
Welcome to Under the Shell, presented by Testudo Times. I'm Brendan Weissel.
Sam Jane.
And Michael Howes.
And today we're bringing on Maryland's one of their biggest boosters to talk about the Kevin Willard departure, who they could potentially hire next, and what goes into being the man behind the scenes. We're happy to have on Gary Geller. Let's just call it how it is. Give us a scale 1 through 10 of how shocked you were when Kevin Willard's departure kind of became semi-official and then official.
By the time it came official, I wasn't that shocked. I was, when it originally leaked out that he had been looking at the Villanova job, I was a little taken back by it. I'm pretty close with Kevin. I've worked very closely with him, since he's been here, and wasn't totally surprised about it. He hasn't been overly happy here. I don't think his family has been that happy here. And so, it is what it is at this point.
How did it kind of all play out from your perspective? When did you kind of first start hearing the news that, Willard might be out the door?
Well, it's funny because we had my wife and I and my two sons and my son's fiance had a family trip planned for 2 years to be in New Zealand during this time. And it's the end of summer. So, you have to kind of go there while it's still warm. And so I left on March 14th, a very long flight, having an athletic director and a basketball coach. And I come back on March 31st and they're gone. So it was, kind of a shock. And I was in touch with Kevin the whole time about it. And I think, from his perspective, and I'm a Maryland guy, so I'll take I'll defend the school first and always. But, I think he hadn't been happy for a long time. There was a lot of things within the athletic department and the current athletic director that, he had reported were promised to him that didn't come through. And I think it had just been building up. And by the time it hit the critical point, it's, sometimes things are broken to the point where they can't be fixed. And I think that's what happened here.
With Damon's departure, obviously you've worked with him in the athletic department, leading Turtle NIL. Did you have any inkling that he would depart to SMU as well?
No, I was very surprised about that.
What do you think was the biggest reason for his exit?
Damon's, he probably, financially got a bump up. He got an opportunity to go to a school. Football's his first love, and there's no secret about that. And, I can respect that. And I think they care way more about football at SMU. They have access to a lot of money, a lot of donor money. So I think, when Damon looked at it, it's like, okay, bump up in salary, a school that really can compete for the national championship, pretty cool city, Dallas. I mean, why not? That's how I would be looking at it.
Fair point. I definitely think as a former football guy too, it seems that probably lined up more with his expectations of how programs should be run. And I wanted to ask you kind of about that. Willard made some claims that he thought Maryland's NIL when it started was at the bottom barrel of the country at the beginning. And then you kind of have said that wasn't necessarily the case. They've been in the top, the bottom part of the top half of the Big Ten. Can you just kind of talk about where Maryland's NIL stood and the conversations you and Willard had about raising the money and where it was going?
Yeah, I think, Kevin's, comments, I don't think they were directed at me or, Harvey Sanders or, the guys that run the NIL. I think it was more the support from the administration where a lot of schools were, even though they couldn't give money, they were giving a lot of support. They were hiring general managers, they were hiring, analytics companies, things like that to really help support NIL. They were holding fundraisers, golf tournaments, things like that, where from the Maryland perspective, it was kind of just left up to myself and the guys and Alex O'Neill and the guys that run Turtle NIL. And so I think that's where his frustration was, is like, hey, you got these, 2 or 3 unpaid retired guys running the whole program here, and that's the whole support I get. And he was, thankful for us for that, but I think it really frustrated him that there wasn't administrative help. Now, last year, Brian Ullman, who's executive vice president of marketing and strategic in Maryland, he got involved in the NIL, and he had some pretty progressive thoughts about it and helped a lot. But I think at that point, just my opinion, it was too little, too late for Kevin.
Yeah, I want to back up a little bit here. How did you specifically get involved in Turtle NIL? And did someone approach you to start the NIL collective? How did you get involved?
Yeah, it's a longer story, but when Mark Turgeon was there, I was out to dinner with him and his son and a few other friends. And this was July, I think, of 21, and the NIL was just announced. And, Mark was saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know, how do you make sense of this? And, I said, well, let's look at it from a business perspective. Why don't we form a direct marketing collective and go, try to raise a little bit of money, go to some local businesses and say, hey, from a shared perspective, let's have, Eric Ayala and Fats Russell and, some of the players at that time, come do meet and greets and sign hats and stuff like that. I mean, it was a very simple and kind of raw thing in the beginning. And Mark called me the next day and said, okay, I want you to do this. Can you help me, please? I don't know what I'm doing. So I was like, yeah, sure. I kind of, at the time I was retired and was, happy to lend some help there, and it kind of snowballed from there.
How do you think that when the game started, and you've been a booster now for so long, how did it shift almost in booster mentalities and giving money comparative to the NIL era to pre-NIL? Because there's so many avenues now to give money. I remember talking with Kirby Mills and other people and saying, boosters are confused. Do we give money to the university? Do we give to the collective? How has the mentality and donations shifted between the eras?
Well, I mean, you're right. I don't even know if it shifted. I mean, you certainly have in the beginning some people, and I didn't have this attitude. I always felt players should be paid. How they were paid, is up for debate. But some boosters didn't want anything to do with paying players, so they would just direct the money at the Terrapin Club, which would go towards scholarships, which is a very noble cause as well. But, there was enough boosters that really want a good basketball program that, once we showed them, okay, that this is how it's going to develop into keeping a Julian Reese here or helping get Derek Queen here, the people were willing to pay. But, it's true. There's a million different ways to give money at Maryland. They're all, worthy causes. But, it's sort of a conundrum because you got, I think, Kirby Mills is great, but you got us fighting against him, for the same, dollar. Someone's only going to give a certain amount of dollars, and how they allocate it is how they want to allocate it. So it was a good, valid point and valid question.
What do you think that the makeup or the allocation of donations and NIL driven money is between football and basketball here? If you had to kind of percentage it.
Percentage it up because it's all changing in about 2 months.
Yeah, fair enough.
Up to this point or after this point?
Up to this point, I would say. And then after at that point for you.
Coach Loxley, he's got his guys, and Maryland basketball has their guys, and people like me, I give to both. A lot of guys give to both, but I'm probably personally I lean more on the basketball side, and I think most of the big donors lean more towards the basketball side.
Do you think that'll change moving forward?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The way higher allocation is going to go towards football. All of the Big Ten. They kind of all benchmark all 18 schools what each other's doing, and they're all roughly in the same amount of percentage allocation. football to basketball.
Are you personally planning to stay involved with the collective, or does it depend on who Maryland hires?
It'll depend. I mean, if it's one of the guys I know, I know a lot of the coaching candidates, and I do not know who they're going to hire. And although I'll just break off for a second, I think they're doing the people involved are doing a good job trying to get the candidates in. If the coach wants me to stay involved a little bit, I'm happy to do it. I think at some point, they hired G. Roy Simon to be the general manager. He's a good guy. He'll do a great job. And they probably should hire a basketball general manager, and it shouldn't be someone who's retired and likes to play golf a lot and, works when he feels like working. It should be a full-time guy. But I'll stay involved as long as the new coach wants me to.
Do you have any preference for who they would hire?
My more preference, and you're really you could kind of look at it two ways. One is because we sort of have the opportunity with the portal now to spend the rest of our NIL money before the salary cap hits next year. We need to get someone quickly. So one school of thought is a lot of good candidates out there. Local guys and national guys. Let's get someone in here quickly. Let's strike in the portal. Let's deploy the money we have. And, the other school of thought is let's wait till we hire an AD and let him or her, pick the next candidate. Now, I'm more for the former, but other people might be for the latter.
When would you expect the new AD to be hired?
I know they're putting together a search committee, but I really don't know. I'm not too involved in that. And, I'm confident they'll do a good job.
Right.
There's I know some of the people on their search committee, and they're really, really smart people. So I'm pretty confident on that.
Right. And with no AD right now, who would you think is kind of leading this head coaching search for Maryland?
I think it's, with Daryl Pines, Brian Ullman, and Colleen Sorum, I think, they're all pretty competent. They, I think, suspected Kevin was leaving and started, proactively, looking. And I think they've, I talk to them fairly frequently, and I think they've done a great job.
What do you think that they're like? I know you say you don't know who it'll be, and I think nobody at this point knows, but what do you think is kind of the qualities that Maryland's looking for in the next coach? Are you trying to get a local guy to kind of stand, Leno Moore and former alums have put out kind of the call for that? Are you going for a more forward-thinking hire? As is someone who has a ton of head coaching experience? Like, what qualities have you heard is kind of the main aspects Maryland's looking for?
I think, someone with experience, someone with local ties. I mean, this is a extremely fertile area for recruiting, and, having someone who knows it is, gives you a leg up. I think someone who wants to be here, I would, welcome someone who's been here before, or, a former player. Those would all be the kind of people that I would be supportive of. And, I think those are the main qualities. Also, who's available.
So I think that's kind of, when you see the names being floated around, those are the main. Tony Skinn, Dwayne Simpkins, those are guys that either played here, coached here, have some ties to the area. So that seems to be kind of one of the main themes. Wrapping up before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of outrage over Willard's departure, and I think rightfully so from some Terps fans, just about kind of the press conferences and the saga that went down. But I guess since you've spoken with Coach Willard, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of give your opinion on everything, all the comments that have been made, everything that he said over this 2-week saga per se, about everything that happened, and just kind of give maybe your thoughts about some of the press conferences and interviews and such.
Yeah, Kevin's my friend, and I've said this to him and would say it to him again. I don't really condone how he went about it, and I will say, there's probably more to the story than the people that are inflamed really know. And sometimes events, get out of hand and take control of the situation. I think that's pretty much what happened. But I'm not happy how it went about, and we're sort of left in the lurch right now. And I'm close to some of the players, and they were upset. A bunch of them jumped into the transfer portal, which they this day and age they kind of have to do what's right for them. And so I think it could have been handled better, but I'm not pissed at him or anything. It's just sometimes events get out of control.
Yeah, I mean, another donor, Barry P. Gossett, in a CBS article said that the donors were, quote, played like a drum. Did you kind of feel that same sentiment?
Barry is welcomed his opinion. I don't. I think there's more to it than that. So I'll just say, probably looking back, could have been handled better. We all wish we had the reverse button on our personal remote, but we don't. And you guys will see that as you progress in life and business. Sometimes you do things you're not, you think could have gone better. And I think this would be one of those situations.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I also think the timing of Maryland obviously playing in the Sweet 16 when it was all going down didn't make it much better. You mentioned kind of you have relationships with the players. Going forward in the transfer portal, what are the next steps right now, at least from your perspective, how to maybe get some of the guys that were on the roster last year to come back? And also with so many players jumping in, what's the plan, you think, to field a roster?
Yeah, I mean, well, the whole situation is crazy. I mean, Indiana has 0 players on their roster right now. I guess Maryland has 1 or 0 now also. I would just say I've talked, I'm close to some of the parents, and and I won't name names, but it shouldn't be too hard to figure out if some of the right local people are hired here, we would have, a shot at some of the players coming back. And, particularly if we're in a competitive situation with the money. I mean, it's all money driven now. And this is really just the first wave of transfer portal. The same thing happened last year where we had the first few days we had a huge burst of players, and then it kind of leveled off for a while, and then we had another burst of players. So there's going to be a second wave of players, and whoever our coach is going to be able to tap into that. I feel pretty confident that if we get the right guy, we might be able to get 1 or 2 of our guys back. I think there's only 3 or 4 out anyway, so it's not like we have 10 guys to try to come back. But pretty much every team is doing the same thing. I mean, look at Mark Pope at Kentucky made Sweet 16. He started late April and had no one. And that's Kentucky, but it can be done. And with the right guy, we'll do it.
Well, we appreciate you hopping on, giving us some insight. Thank you so much, Harry, and good luck.
My tech son isn't here right now.
That's okay. It gives kind of the booster in the dark type of
the shadowy shadow. I've always been the wizard behind the curtain anyway, so but hey, meet you guys, and have any questions, just text me.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Harry. Well, that was an insightful interview from Mr. Geller, and really gave us some insight into what happened with Kevin Willard and where Maryland turns next. And guys, let's just start right there. Obviously, the news became official over the weekend. Kevin Willard to become Villanova's next head coach. He departs after 3 seasons in College Park, 2 NCAA tournament bids, 3 wins in the tournament, no regular season champions, and obviously gets a fairly elite job at Villanova. So a super meteoric rise for Willard in this last season here. His final press conference included a lot of I don't knows, and I don't knows. He kind of acted oblivious, said he didn't know.
I think he knew.
Yeah. He hadn't talked to his agent. He didn't know if any schools had offered him, but days earlier he had talked about how, he didn't know what his future was going to be. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma there. Basically, let's just call it what it is. The last couple of weeks has been a shit storm of various press conferences and remarks, and I think it kind of all transpired into Willard's departure, leaving Terps fans feeling pretty animostic toward him. I do want to say that I think Willard ultimately, if he could have handled it again, would have done it differently, even though he said he wouldn't have. And I do appreciate some of the honesty about the NIL and the revenue share here, but at the same time, just the way that it was ultimately handled, I think was not great. So I think that kind of wraps up the Willard saga.
Yeah, it's such an interesting contrast because at the end of last season, when they had a really bad season, a lot of people were like, if he has another bad year, he's probably going to be out. And then he has an incredible year. Honestly, does a very good job in the past 365 days, getting a team together, fixing the 3-point shooting problems, and getting the team to the Sweet 16. But you have to think, if it wasn't this year, it was going to be next year, it was going to be 2 years from now. He just didn't love being at the University of Maryland. I think that was pretty much clear in the last 2 years. He was never a guy who was in love with Maryland. He wasn't from here. Like, he didn't have the ties to the University of Maryland that I think obviously the fans and alumni do. And that just makes it hard for a coach because it's not his dream job. It's a very good job to have, but if it's not your dream job, you're always going to be on the move.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, the more I don't blame him for taking the Villanova job. Of course, it's one of the best opportunities in the nation for a coach to have a national championship winning program over the past decade, a school where basketball is the number one priority, clearly. And that's what he wanted. But going forward, like you guys said, just the way he handled it, the way he kind of held that over his team's head during their tournament run, just not something that I appreciated. I know the fans didn't appreciate. A lot of people on Twitter didn't appreciate. And I think going forward, what some people want to see is some sort of tampering rules. Because it's very clear, like this Villanova job, whether he talked to Villanova or whether his agent talked to Villanova, like there's no reason that that should be illegal for a coach to have that opportunity and to figure out his decision like that immediately after the season ends. Like there has to be some sort of tampering rules where those sort of conversations are held to the end of the coach's season. Because like the way it played out, like he clearly, whether it was him or his agent, someone was in contact with Villanova. Whether he actually took the job before the tournament run, that's up for debate. We may never know that, but I would like to see some sort of regulations in place so that a coach is not thinking about another opportunity and already has their foot out the door in the middle of a Sweet 16 run. It does not seem fair to both the players and also the fans, the boosters, the athletic administration, everybody involved outside of Willard.
Yeah, and this kind of is as we expected. There's been a lot of turnover now with Willard's departure. Already, Maryland's roster is basically bare at this point. There's 4 remaining players on the roster: Jahari Long, Chance Stevens, Braden Pierce, and gosh, I'm blanking.
It'd be Lucas Sattel, right? Yeah,
Lucas Sattel. So clearly,
they don't even have a starting 5 at the moment.
John Calipari quote: "I met the roster. There is no roster.
Yeah, there is no team. Yeah, exactly."
Akin quote there as Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Deshaun Harris-Smith, Tafara Gapari, and Jay Young all entered the transfer portal. The biggest ones, obviously, Gillespie and Rice. I actually talked to Rodney Rice's dad, and I would be pretty optimistic if I was a Maryland fan about Rodney coming back. If he gets the right opportunity with the right coach, his dad told me that his heart is with being a Maryland player. At the end of the day, he wants to return. He just obviously feels the uncertainty, and with the era of college basketball now, I think you can't fault the kid at all for entering the portal. And so I think that I would put him coming back actually at a higher percentage than him leaving. Is kind of my opinion. So it'd be huge for the new coach to get Rodney back. Gillespie, I think, is gone. I believe that it seems like that's either a Villanova destination or potentially Tennessee, where he is from and would have maybe gone there last year, according to Harrison Rich of the Diamondback. If Zakai Ziegler hadn't been there. So those are the 2 big ones. And we'll see what the new coach does with the new roster, because he's going to have to replace 99%, almost 100% of Maryland's scoring for next year.
you literally can't blame any of these guys for leaving. I mean, there's no coach right now. There's no AD. I mean, if I was in the Maryland basketball team, I obviously would enter the transfer portal. You kind of have to. Time is at this point running out. The one person I wanted to ask you about, Sam, is Jahari Long. You have to think he's probably going to follow Willard. He followed Willard from Seton Hall to Maryland. Is that what you're hearing? Or
Yeah, Jahari, obviously recovering from the injury, should be good to go next year. They're saying I talked to an assistant coach a while ago that said that really progressing well. But yeah, I think Jahari's probably going to just enter his name into the portal relatively soon, if I had to guess. And so we'll have to see what goes on there. But the good news for Maryland is there are coaches that were hired at this stage of the cycle last year. I think, Calipari and Mark Pope were both hired, but that kind of washes itself out because both of those have a ridiculous amount of money. But if you look at, I think kind of the best example is Eric Musselman at USC was hired around this time in April, put together a roster of the transfer portal, got a really good transfer in Desmond Claude, had a couple of freshmen coming in that I think kind of boosted him, and they still had a pretty season, So I don't think that you're really looking at this Maryland team and expecting like for next year, and we don't need to get into next year's expectations, but the new coach who we're going to talk about potentially in a minute here is going to have a tall task on their hand, but I don't think it's impossible. With all the names in the portal now, he definitely can put together a roster that can be competitive in year one. And I think if you're a Terps fan, that's basically all you can hope for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would say Eric Musselman's probably a better coach than whoever Maryland's going to hire. Not necessarily, though. We're about to get into that. But I think Terps fans would probably be somewhat content with a pretty 500 season next year, given that there is literally nobody on the roster. There's no scoring left on the roster. And I would imagine the roster turnover is going to be almost 100%. So we'll see. Should we dive into some possible coaching prospects for next year?
Let's do it. We wanted to kind of collect all the names that have been put together and kind of give you a hot board and some info on each guy. So let's kind of start at, I think that we should do this from most likely down. And I think that the guy right now whose name is probably getting the most traction is a George Mason coach, and that's Tony Skinn, former assistant at Maryland. And Mike, you did a report on Tony. Take it away.
Yeah, so that's a guy with some local roots in the area, obviously. Born in Nigeria, ended up playing high school ball at Tacoma Academy, then played at George Mason from 03 to 06, was part of that legendary Final Four team under Jim Laragna. He kind of bounced around as an assistant after a playing career overseas. He was at Louisiana Tech, Seton Hall, Ohio State, and then reunited with Kevin Willard at Maryland before becoming the Mason coach in 2023. At Mason in the 2 years that he's been there so far, Mason is 47-21 under Skinn. This year they lost in the second round of the NIT. So for me, just kind of looking at Skinn's resume, the local roots stick out. He's obviously a really good recruiter. Willard liked him in that regard too. That's why he brought him to Maryland after they coached together in Seton Hall. The one glaring thing that sticks out, though, is just the inexperience. And we're going to talk about Dwayne Simpkins in a bit. But for a coach like Skinn, who is not coaching in a major conference like the Big Ten, that is quite the jump in terms of roster building, where you go from fielding a team where you're going to try to develop players for 3 to 4 years. And if that player is good, they're going to dip into the transfer portal, go to a more major program. And now he is that major program. And instead of trying to develop players for 3 to 4 years, which is still a priority, it's just not as big as we saw Willard saying he would have only brought in one freshman going forward at Maryland. He's got to dip into free agency if he makes that jump. He's got to learn how to do that, and pretty quick. Like, he has not had experience as a head coach of a major program doing that. So that would be my major concern, is just he does not have that experience of building a roster like Maryland will have to. And we just talked about it. That's going to be his main job if he gets hired in the coming weeks. His first priority is getting a roster together for next season, whether that's bringing in freshmen who have decommitted, who are not highly rated yet and don't have a school, or dipping into the transfer portal and seeing if anyone wants to take a shot at Maryland. Like, he's going to have a big task for him, and he has not done that yet at Mason.
I'd push back on that a little bit and just say that when he was at Maryland, obviously what he was mostly doing was recruiting. And so it definitely would give him a leg up if he came back to Maryland, because he knows the people in the communities that he'd be recruiting, which would give him a leg up. Obviously, it's going to be different in the next 2 weeks because it's mostly all transfer portal. There'd be probably no freshmen he'd be recruiting at this point. So in the long term, though, I think that's probably what would be very attractive about him. I mean, the thing is, if Maryland's making a hire to be good in the next 2 years, they're cheating themselves. The hire that Maryland makes right now should be someone they want to have this job for 5, 6, 7 years, like even more, probably 10 years. I think fans would probably take 2 years of poor play if it means, having success consistently in the future.
Yeah, I think Skin is kind of one of the more interesting names. I think Mike laid out some of the concerns. Another concern is his offenses have been pretty abysmal at George Mason, generally in the low hundreds on Ken Pom. And if you're doing that at George Mason and a step up in competition, I think that might be cause for some concern. But an elite defensive coach, it seems, and has some pretty cool. Have you guys seen the clips of him on the scout team? He plays on the scout team at George Mason.
He's still got it,
which is pretty dope.
He's still got it.
Still got it a little bit. Maybe he can run point guard. Be a dual coach.
I mean, he's been to the Final Four. I don't know. I would take
it. make him a new terrific term. And yeah, I think Skin is probably right now. I don't think there's a clear favorite, but if I had to guess, he's probably the leader right now. But that's just based off kind of random rumors, not anything I know. Moving on to the next guy who I think is getting some steam here, and I'll take this one, is UConn assistant coach Luke Murray. Actually the son of pretty legendary actor Bill Murray. He didn't play basketball at a high level and served as an assistant on an AAU team coached by former Boston Celtics head coach John Carroll during his final years in college. He then started at Post as an assistant for moving kind of around the country at Arizona, Wagner, and Towson. So there's some kind of local ties before he was first hired. Not first hired. He was hired by Dan Hurley at Wagner and then Rhode Island in 2013, 2015. This is kind of one of the biggest strengths of Luke Murray, I think. Dan Hurley has hired him 3 different times. He hired him at Wagner, he hired him at Rhode Island, and then he hired him at UConn, where he's been an assistant for 4 seasons. He said that Murray is more than ready for a head coaching job and that he's a huge fan of him. This is a guy that I think is a pretty ingenious mind in college basketball. He plays a pretty big role in the offense and development of the front court players. The Huskies they've been one of the best offenses in the country year after year, and he's mentored players like Adam Sanogu, Donovan Clingan, and does a huge deal in recruiting according to their website. Been ranked by ESPN as one of the top 10 coaches under 40, similarly named by The Athletic as one of the top 40 influential people in basketball under 40, and he's recognized by 247 as one of the top 5 coaches in the country. So this is a guy that's brought in some big names at UConn. Clingan was a huge get for them. He was the main recruiter there, and I think that this is clearly a coach that would be kind of one of those uprising guys that you're getting, and it would be a really, really strong hire, I think, for Maryland. Now, I want to say some causes for concern. This is a guy with no head coaching experience. And if you look at last year's cycle, all the main hires that were kind of in the Power 5, there were almost none that were guys with no coaching experience. I mean, just go down the list. Musselman, Calipari, Mark Pope, Mark Byington, Jake Diebler wasn't even an interim head coach, Andy Enfeld. Like, these are Darian DeVries. These are all guys that had coaching experience before they took a leap. Now, granted, he's been an assistant at the top program in college basketball for the past couple of years, which I guess you could almost say equates to being somewhat of a head coach, but they're not the same, as Mike said. Being a head coach requires significantly more roster building. It requires being kind of the CEO of a company almost, and that's just a big cause for concern with Murray, I think. And I also think that there's a little bit of worry with how much do you separate his identity with the UConn identity, right? And so that'll be kind of fascinating to watch. But I think big reasons for optimism with Murray is that this is clearly an up-and-coming mind and somebody that I think if Maryland hired would be the type of forward-thinking hire that they haven't had in a while. So not a guy who has a ton of local ties, but a really, really strong candidate, and I think would be at this stage of the cycle, probably one of Maryland's best bets. My opinion there.
It's just tough for me to like put that much faith into someone who hasn't been a head coach yet. Um, and I don't know what the athletic administration's thinking about this, but that would probably be my biggest cause for concern is you're taking over a major program. We want stability. We don't want to try out someone who hasn't been a head coach yet. It fails in 3 years, and then we're doing the search again. Like that's the biggest concern for me.
Yeah, I was surprised that he hadn't been scooped up yet, actually, in coaching search. I know that there haven't been like a ton of openings, but I would have thought that he would have got scooped up. So it makes me a little bit hesitant. I agree with Mike there that I would have thought that I don't think Maryland's going to hire a guy with no coaching experience, but if they do, it's going to be Luke Murray. So that's something we'll have to see. I do think that there's definitely a very high ceiling there, but there's also a pretty low floor. So I don't know if Maryland's ready to make that risk, honestly.
Yeah, those are both valid points for sure. Let's move off of Murray and onto someone with a ton of coaching experience, Buzz Williams, B.
Yeah, I mean, he was a name that was really floated around even before Willard had left. Reports that he wanted the job at Maryland, but I think those have really cooled off in the past couple of days. The biggest issue with Buzz Williams is that he has absolutely no ties to the University of Maryland at all. He grew up in Texas, Texas guy. He does have a ton of head coaching experience. He was at Marquette as an assistant and then as a head coach. He was there from 2008 to 2014, then at Virginia Tech for 5 years, and then he's been at Texas A&M since then. He's had a lot of success. He's made 11 tournaments in 16 years, not counting the COVID year, 3 16s, 1 Elite Eight. I mean, this is a hire. If Maryland hires this guy, it would be because they are interested in winning now. I mean, I think Buzz Williams is the only coach they're looking at that gives them a legitimate chance to make the tournament next year. But even so, it's going to be very, very tough. His biggest difference from Willard is that you kind of never knew how Willard was feeling. He's very stoic on the sidelines. Buzz Williams lets you know how he's feeling, sweating a lot, jumping up in the air, doing crazy things with his hands. I mean, he's a very emotional head coach, and I think someone that the fan base would rally around. I just, at the end of the day, I think the hire makes sense. Like I said, if Maryland wants to win next year and 365 days from now, saying, Maryland played in another Sweet 16, I think the only coach I could see that happening with is him just because of his experience. But I just don't think that it's possible they hire a guy with no Maryland ties, but I think given the past 2 hires, Turgeon obviously also came from Texas A&M when he was successful there, but hiring a guy with no Maryland ties, I think, makes it tough. And the other thing is, as I stated, he pretty much wants a new job every 5 to 6 years. And because he doesn't have any ties to Maryland, I don't see why that would change 6 years from now. So definitely a very interesting hire and someone who would have success at Maryland. He's made a ton of tournaments, and he would likely do that here. But the rumors have not the rumors, but the attention to his name has kind of cooled off. So we'll have to see on that. But definitely a hire that could be very successful in the near future.
Yeah, the big thing the program wants for right now is stability. Do we want a coach that's going to leave in 6 years? Which it does make sense. Like, you want to be on the move too, because you want to be with an AD who wants you. ADs move around too. So Buzz switching jobs every 6 years, I don't blame him for that. But from a program standpoint, you want stability for the long haul, not just a couple nice tournament runs, Sweet 16 berth maybe you reach the Elite Eight, and then he's gone. Like, I don't think that's what the program wants right now.
It's tough because I think Brendan is right. This is a guy that clearly knows how to win, and has done it at multiple different stops. But the A, bouncing around, and B, kind of just the awkwardness of each time he exits. Like, he just went to this round of 32 with A&M, and now he's basically begging Maryland, like it seems like, to kind of hire him.
He wants out. It's more that he wants out of Texas A&M than Maryland wants him, is what it seems.
Yeah, I think it's a one-sided kind of affair almost. And I also think that this is just a personal thing. I don't know how his style of just like recruit insane athletes and offense. They're always one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country since he got to A&M. Like, how well does that work in the Big Ten, where basically it is a very much rebounding based conference where everyone rebounds? Like, are you really going to out rebound Michigan State every time you play Michigan State? Probably not. So I don't know how that's going to work in the Big Ten. And also hiring a Texas A&M retreat again. Shout out to Turge, his biggest soldier, standing here in the flesh.
All right, and then we'll move on to Dwayne Simpkins after that. Kind of similar to Tony Skinn in his second year as head coach this year. Simpkins did reach the NCAA tournament this year. The Eagles won the Patriot League for just the fourth time in program history, reached the NCAA tournament for just the fourth time in program history, won a game in the first four, and they had a 22-13 record. Of course, deep roots in the DMV for Simpkins. He played under Gary Williams from 92 to 96, played at the Math under Morgan Wooten, legendary high school coach in the area. Then was an assistant at Bishop O'Connell, coached at Sidwell Friends, St. Albans, and now is at American. So this is another guy with deep local roots and someone who I think that the booster base, the alumni base would be really favorable for just because of those Maryland roots. He has more Maryland roots than Skin. And we haven't mentioned it yet, but the letter that Len Elmore put out yesterday, he basically called for the next head coach, the next AD to have Maryland's roots. So this is the prime guy, if that's what you're looking for, someone who bleeds Maryland, is not going to leave Maryland for another opportunity. Simpkins is that guy. The only thing in the way is that just that experience. He's only been a head coach at American for 2 years. Obviously, he's made the NCAA tournament, but again, Patriot League versus Big Ten, completely different league, completely different way of roster building. And it would be interesting to see how he adapts.
His head coaching record at American is also only 38-29, so not like he's just running through opponents. But obviously, that first year kind of a wash too. So I think Simpkins is definitely a good candidate. We'll see if he's actually in the running.
He would honestly be my top candidate.
Moving off Dwayne Simpkins and going on to David Cox, he's the only kind of assistant that seems to be getting floated around, and this is a guy who has actually had some head coaching experience. He first coached at his high school level in D.C., so there's your local ties at Archbishop Carroll, and then spent the next 7 years as an assistant principal at his alma mater, St. John's Prep. He came to Maryland after serving as the head coach at Rhode Island for 4 seasons, and where he worked with Dan Hurley. A lot of Dan Hurley ties here as an assistant before becoming the head coach. He went 64-55 at Rhode Island, including he went 21-9 in 2019 and 2020. That was probably his best team. And kind of his records across were pretty mediocre. 18-15, 21-9, 10-15, and 15-16 for an overall record of 64-55. This is a guy who clearly, has some coaching experience, has been at a lot of different stops and worked with a lot of different coaches as well. He was an associate head coach at Rutgers and an assistant coach at Georgetown with John Thompson and a director of ops at Pitt. So he's kind of played a lot of different roles. Has been pretty critical in Maryland's recruitment of a lot of local kids as well. I think if you bring him back, you can definitely expect Rodney Rice to return. You can probably expect some local kids to maybe consider Maryland more because of those ties that he has. He actually began his coaching career as an assistant coach with the Washington, D.C. Assault AAU program. And Jameer Young, about him, and another assistant said, they're 2 DMV guys and we share the DMV culture. So that's where we connect. And I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to play for both of them at the same time. So clearly a guy who I think has some DC area ties. I just don't really know how much Maryland thinks promoting an assistant aesthetically and optical wise, like how well does that look? It's this late in the game, but to promote an assistant kind of just looks like, yeah, we did all of our homework and we didn't really know, so we're gonna give it to the top assistant. And I think that's a little undeserving of Cox. Like, this is a guy who's been a head coach and has experience, and I think wouldn't do a bad job. I just don't know if he's necessarily gonna be the guy. But I think that you could do worse than David Cox. I'll say that.
You also have to wonder with him, would he stick around if Skin got the job? Like, those are other factors that what assistants would stay around. I assume if Buzz comes, none of the assistants are going to stay. Or very few of them. So that's like other hypotheticals I'm sure they're thinking about. Just overall, to sum it up, I mean, Maryland's in, we talked about it, but such a difficult position without an athletic director at the moment. It's just hard to know exactly who's calling the shots. And so it's going to be interesting to see who they hire, and they have to get to work almost immediately.
Yeah, like none of these names, we just went down the list, and I don't know if any of these were like, oh my God, like this is a home run hire, right? We all had reasons for concern with each guy, right? So I think that these are all probably, you're hoping, are long-term like success plays. That's kind of what I kind of think of it as, because I don't know if any one guy is like going to come in and like, oh yeah, like this is a, great hire right away. So I think that basically you're just kind of hoping to hit a double and eventually it turns into a home run.
As a
Maybe.
pass ball or something, he gets it.
But yeah, I don't think that, like you said, B, I think this is a really, really tough situation for Maryland. And it'll be interesting to see who they hire, and we'll keep you updated on it.
Yeah. Let's run through some other sports. Women's basketball finished their season in a great game against South Carolina. They had them on the ropes. I mean, Maryland legitimately could have won that game. Offense just went super cold in the final 4 or 5 minutes, but it looked for a second there like they were going to take South Carolina. Cheyenne Sellers' last game. Overall, I think the women's team is going to be okay. They had a pretty successful season. I think with Bree McDaniel, they're maybe more competitive in that game, but still, South Carolina is a team that is, they just win games. You saw it against Duke in the round after. So they played very well. I would not worry at all about the women's basketball program. They're going to get some good recruits. They're in a good spot. It's really all I got on them. Overall, I would say pretty successful season.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina is South Carolina. Maryland kept them on the ropes. Maryland can have 5 players who are playing really, really well, but South Carolina will have 10. Like, that's just how it is. The Gamecocks are really good. Dawn Staley leads a really strong program there.
Turnovers. I mean, that was kind of the biggest issue, especially late. And unfortunately, Shy in her last game, would have loved to have seen her gone out on a really high note, but she kind of struggled against SC. But like Mike said, a lot of people do. So moving off the women's basketball team and into the lacrosses. Men's lacrosse back to number 2 in the rankings, but a good win over Penn State. They were able to take down the Nittany Lions after the loss to Michigan, so kind of recovered from that pretty devastating loss there. And they're now kind of faced with a couple of big bouts here. They get a pretty easy Rutgers game that they've beaten now for 100 straight years, it feels like, before they have to play number 3 ranked Ohio State. That'll be a huge game. So big news there with the lacrosse team coming up. Women's lacrosse, Brendan, they just took a loss to Penn. Terps dropped another game. The turnovers kind of piling up there in that one. And unfortunately, Kathy Reese's team just, I don't know, doesn't seem to necessarily have the offensive firepower that they've had in at the peak of the Reese era.
Yeah, no, absolutely not a performance I was expecting. They've struggled on the road. They lost to Northwestern on the road in their last away game. Then they lose to Penn. They blew out Oregon, but Oregon is not a very serious Big Ten women's lacrosse program. JJ Soriano really struggled. Allowed 11 goals on 5 saves. Ended up getting pulled. So I think goalkeeping is definitely an issue for this team. But yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the box score of the game, Maryland's pretty much in control of that game in the first quarter, and then they have a very bad second quarter where they allow 5 goals to, and they only have 1. So I think a big thing for this team is momentum. When they've been able to play well and get out to quick starts, they've been successful, but I just don't think this team overall has the offensive firepower backed up with goaltending to make a super deep run. I mean, they're going to be competitive in most games they play. Obviously, Northwestern took it to them, but I would say a bit of a step back from where they've been. But I mean, a step back for the women's lacrosse program is still top 10 team in the country. So it's not like they've fallen off from grace. It's just they've had trouble competing with the top 5 teams in the country in the past 4 years. It's just what it's been.
Yeah, it's I think a strange paradox when you've set the expectations so high that then if you don't match up with kind of the recent years, people critique. But this is still, and including us, but this is a number 8 team in the country, right? Like they're still one of the better programs around. So it's really falling short of the expectations you've placed on yourself.
That's absolutely fair. Yeah.
Moving forward to baseball, Mike, take us through what happened with Matt Swope's team.
Yeah, I mean, that's another team that just hasn't met the expectations to open up the year. They had another 2-2 week last week, got a midweek game against George Mason, but then had another series loss against Northwestern. And they've now lost all 5 series that they've played this season. They have 7 remaining. Going to be some crucial games for them against those Big Ten conference opponents since they're currently outside the 12-team playoff, but still pretty razor thin there. But honestly, the biggest thing, we're at like the midway point of the season now is just inconsistency within the team. We'll start with Friday against Northwestern. Terps have really strong starting pitching from Kyle McCoy. Christopher Cespedes follows it up. Really quality outing out of the bullpen. Offense has a pretty slow day, though. So in the 9th inning, Joey McManus gives up a 2-run home run. Then in the 10th inning, Andrew Johnson gives up a game-winning solo home run. And the offense has no response in either of those frames. Then they have an improved performance on Sunday. They put up 8 runs. They don't get out hit by 8 like they did on Friday night. But it was just an overall terrible game from the pitching staff then. And then on Sunday, you see them have a record-breaking performance. They scored 22 runs. That's the most that they've ever scored against a Big Ten opponent since they've been in the conference. They put up 22 runs and they win the game. Even then, the pitching staff gives up 11 runs. So it's like, at what point can the pitching staff kind of back up a strong offensive performance? At what point can the offense back up a strong pitching performance? Like, it just has not been on the same wavelength all throughout the season. And it's really weird seeing the offensive struggles because this is a team, we've seen them score 35 runs this season. We've seen them score 22 runs like they did against Northwestern on Sunday. And then you also see them in a series at Washington get shut out on the Sunday rubber match. They only averaged 2 runs a game against Washington, which Swope credited that towards the weather, but at the same time, both teams are playing in that weather. Like, I don't know how far the weather can really go as an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of summed it up. It's been the bats are very good, but as we've said all season, if you don't have the pitching, you just can't win games. And so I assume that's what it's going to be for the next for the remainder of the season, unless they make a drastic change.
I think they can figure it out. I mean, this team has talent. They have talent in the pitching staff. They have talent with the bats. It just all needs to click at the same time, and it hasn't yet.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Other team in the Diamond, softball, they had pretty packed games this weekend, but they did not win any of them. They lost to UCLA in 3 straight games. That's all I got on softball there. Very quickly, we don't have a game a week. We have a pick of the week. It's mine. Who do you think is going to be the head coach? Give me the one-word answer.
Tony Skinn.
Wayne Simpkins.
I'll take Tony Skinn too. So that's 2 against 1. We'll have to see. It's going to be exciting times, and maybe we'll have to do an emergency episode when someone gets hired. Let's wrap it up. Terrific Terp. I took a little bit of help from David Ungrady here in the Terrapin Tales book, my favorite book for Terrific Terps. So for this week's Terrific Terp, we got to actually head to the cross-country course, and we have to head back to the 1930s. Thomas Fields grew up down the road from College Park, and during his sophomore year of high school in 1933 is when he started showing up to practices for the Terps. This is high school, not college. He would hitchhike from Hyattsville to the track, and after a few weeks, the team started to notice his running skills. Finally, 4 years later in 1937, it was his turn to put on a Maryland uniform and compete. Early in his career during his freshman year, the team took a trip to Charlottesville for a meet at UVA. Fields went out and got an impressive early lead, but he wasn't paying attention during the course tour and didn't know where to turn. So he waited for the next runner to catch up. They pointed him in the right direction, and he still won the race. In fact, he won every cross-country race his freshman year. Fields was also dominant on the track. He was part of 3 different Penn Relays teams that finished first during his junior year. His senior year, he earned All-American status in cross-country. All in all, he won 6 Southern Conference championships. After he graduated UMD, he joined the Marines. He served until 1970, and after that, he returned to UMD as the director of the Terrapin Club. The first cross-country All-American at the University of Maryland is this week's Terrific Terp.
Another good one from B. Shout out the Terrapin Tales book. You should check it out for sure.
I highly recommend it.
We'll be back here next week with more info on Maryland's coaching search and the rest of the spring sports. But for now, stay updated on Twitter. Follow along at all of your podcast platforms and socials. And from the Under the Shell crew, happy April.
Guess what? You've got Under the Shell Podcast. Nobody does it better.